Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are pleased to have today Nancy Rose, who is the artistic director of Encompass New Opera Theater. Hi, Nancy, how are you?
Good, thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. This is Women's Music, Women in Music's Month, Music History Month, and I want to ask you a couple of questions about. We'll get into some aspects of your career, of course, but what was it like, and what is it like being a stage director and an artistic director in basically a man's world? I mean, you're one of a few.
Oh, wow. Well, let's say that let's say there are more than ever, and also more conductor women than ever.
Yeah.
Um, what's it like? It's all good. I've always, fortunately, knock wood, had great experiences with all the cast members I've had over the years, and men have been great. Um, I think some of the opportunities are not always available. Women might get passed over for somebody else,
Is
a
it
man.
still an old boys club, sort of, or?
um, it's in some ways, when you get up, let's say if you're talking about Broadway
Mm-hmm.
or some of the big, I think you could still say that. And certainly, a handful of women have broken through some of the top spots, but there's still a lot more to do in that area.
Mm-hmm. So, what was the impetus for you getting into this business? Did you wake up one day, say in your early teens, and say, "Hey, I want to be a stage director"?
Uh, no, but I grew up in a musical family,
Uh-huh.
so I had music all through growing up, and I had an aunt who was sort of a concert pianist. I took lessons from her. Um, then singing was from age 7. Was singing in concerts in school, and at one point, I got involved in the community theater in Pennsylvania, where I grew up,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of grabbed me to the point where I thought, okay. And then I studied theater and speech and communications, fine arts, and it was in college that I really decided, wow, I'd really like to be a director. And
But where did that come from? Do you like to arrange things or to help people or?
Um, I think the real spark came um, when I was in 6th grade, and I was asked to do a reading. Well, I mean, a memorized thing of a woman who was homeless, and it was a snowstorm. And I took this very seriously, and I memorized it, and I really felt her emotions. And I got up in front of the class, and I really became this woman and her emotions of what was going on, and
Mm-hmm.
I suddenly felt a shift in the energy of the room, and I looked out and I saw my classmates weeping. In 6th grade, if
My,
you can
wow.
imagine. And in that moment, I felt such it was in a way a holy moment. I felt the responsibility that I was partaking in, and I felt the emotion of it was in a way overwhelming. But in those moments, I realized what the theater can do,
Uh-huh.
and that was, I have to say, that really was the spark. And
S- Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, no, that was the spark, and from that moment on, I think I carried that inside of me. Maybe not always realizing until till later on when I started thinking about it.
But making this transference from just drama and recitation to opera, especially at that time, would be a huge leap. You know, opera isn't something that's common to everyday education. I would say even when you and I were in school. So, It was like a special thing, and maybe we got some of it. Definitely the symphony, I'm sure. But to see and be exposed to opera, and then see people like yourself in positions of responsibility, that was quite something, I'm sure.
Well, first of all, I didn't get into opera till years later. So I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. We didn't have any opera. We had music and singing, but there was no opera. I didn't see my first opera until I was 16, when my aunt took me to Washington, and I saw the Barber of Seville.
Ah,
Um,
okay. That's a good start.
Though I really fell into opera by a fluke. Um, and it was when I had come out of graduate school. I was working at the Roundabout Theater, and I applied for a job directing The Mother of Us All
Oh,
by
yes.
Virgil Thompson and Gertrude Stein. So the folks that hired me assumed it was a play by Gertrude Stein. And
Oops.
then they found out, oh no, it's an opera by Virgil Thompson. So
Ah.
they called me up. They said, "Oh, what are you going to do about this?" And I said, "I'll make an adaptation." And they said, "Well, okay." And I said, "I'll need a music director." "Okay, we'll get that." So I went back to the Roundabout and I told my friend, who was the music director, and he said, "You can't do that. You can't just make an adaptation of a classic work like The Mother of Us All." He said, "You have to call up Virgil Thompson and go talk to him." And
Oh
I
my
thought,
gosh. What was
right.
that
And
like?
I was shaking, but it turned out the Roundabout was on 26th Street, and Virgil Thompson's apartment at the Chelsea Hotel was on the 23rd Street. So I called him up, and I'll never forget, he sort of bellowed through the phone. He said, "Come on over." And so I went over, and it was a life changing experience. He swung open the door and we looked at each other. I was sort of dressed like Alice B. Toklas or something. And so, and he looked at me and I looked, and we started laughing, and he called me inside, and I got right to it. And I said, "Mr. Thompson," I told him the situation. I said, "Here are my ideas." So I said this, that, and he goes, "Yes. Oh, yes, yes, that's a good idea. Yes, yes." And then he got up, he ran over to the piano, and he started playing "Angel More, 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 Angel More." And then I started singing with him because I had learned the whole score. And then he went into a duet, and I sang with it and clapped. And well, we just had a good old time together.
Oh
And
my
from
gosh.
that point on, we spent quite a bit of time together. I would go over and have dinner at the El Quixote restaurant downstairs from the Chelsea, and Virgil would tell me about American opera and about how hard it was for American composers to
Hmm.
get their work done. And so they had to go to other countries. A lot of them went to Europe. He went to France, met up with Gertrude Stein, Alice B. Toklas, and the whole salon, and Aaron Copland, George Antile, so many left this country and went overseas to get work.
So, in this being your first experience with American opera and this wonderful relationship, because later on you did Four Saints and Three Acts, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So this opened the door to other composers, or, American composers who were looking for someone to collaborate with. What an exciting time, you know?
It was exciting. And, we went on and did the production we did it at the Church of the Good Shepherd, which was right behind Juilliard.
Oh, yes, I know that one. Yeah.
Right. So, and because of Virgil, of course, and so we got covered by all the major newspapers, and we got recognized for excellence in the creative arts. This was our first production, and
Hmm.
so it became very clear that what we were really sort of gifted to do was focus on American opera. And so that's what Roger Cunningham, the co-founder of Encompass, so he and I said, well, let's be a company specializing in contemporary and modern American opera.
And what an exciting time, because I would say up until that time, really the dominant composer would have been Menotti for American opera. Bernstein had written not Troubled Island, Tahiti.
Yeah, Trouble in Tahiti.
Trouble in Tahiti. I said
Yeah,
Troubled Island. That's William Grant Still,
right.
and
That's true.
but they weren't being produced really. And the big companies, New York City Opera, the Met, I can't think of any American operas that they were doing at the time, except for the opening of the Met. This was way before what your time, but with the Samuel Barber Cleopatra, you know. So there was a niche. That's what I'm trying to say, that you
Yes,
found
yes.
and were able to go in there and get collaborators and funding, which was really important. So, can you talk about that process of founding the company? Because a lot of people think that, oh, it just comes in whole, and I'd like people to understand what it takes so that people who are involved, whether it's the stagecraft people or the musical staff or the performers, understand it's not something where you can just go like Thanos and it's there or it disappears.
Yes, well, it is quite a process, and it takes a hearty, a lot of perseverance and faith,
Hmm.
and belief that you can do it. I mean, you have to have a space out of which to work, and you have to incorporate. Uh, 501(c)(3), not for profit, so a lot of paperwork,
Yeah.
um, and then assembling your artists, getting them lined up, and working with the set designer, costume, lighting.
I
Um,
see that with some of the artists you have, it's like an ensemble. You work with them quite often. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, we would probably have done even more of that if we had had the consistent funding. I always wanted to have a real ensemble of artists to work with
Yes.
over a long period of time. So, of course, people need to work, as shows come up.
Yeah.
So, but we've worked with many of our artists over and over again.
And
Um,
that also helps you when you're choosing repertoire, isn't it? Doesn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Now, I was thinking that one of the things about this company is its longevity. Um, I interviewed Wayne Sanders a while
Oh,
back,
yes, yes.
over the summer actually, and then we did another one which I still have to edit. I confess, but one of the things about small companies is that that component of longevity. How is it that you've lasted so long? You know, what do
Huh.
you think? What do you think is that contributing factor?
Um, Probably because I was born under the sign of Cancer, the crab. And I mean, I'm just not gonna give up. Also, um, I will say this, that Virgil, as I said, oh, by the way, he was our honorary chairman for the last 10 years of his life.
Hmm.
And at one point, he said, um, Nancy, I'm turning the reins of American opera over to you. And I really took that truly into my entire being.
Hmm.
And I feel to this day that it's a calling, and that a mission, if you will, um, to really establish this. And I wanted to go on long after my tenure, because we American, multicultural American artists must have a place that is solid and goes on and on, to bring the musical expression in this genre to the living stage.
And what kind of stories, Nancy, do you think we should be telling? You know, we had a phone conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying to you, I just need something. I just want to laugh, because so many of the operas that are coming out now are so serious and dealing with real life matters, and understandably so. But I think for the totality of theater and the fullness of theater, we have to have all different kinds of aspects. In your choosing of repertoire, do you put out a request for scores, or do people approach you? How does that kind of work?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I agree with you in having a range of storytelling through music. I think that's and telling stories that have to do with living now and what's going on in our world now, but also stories of the past that bring focus to important historical issues, and certainly works of humor. But we get ideas a lot of the time from our singers.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yes, Encompass has always been artist driven.
Well,
I
let me
mean,
let me say this. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt.
yes.
That is unusual that you
Oh,
would listen to singers. Like, hey, what do you
oh,
think about this? It's rare, I'll have to say.
oh.
That openness and that acceptance of singers as having opinions and being able to contribute to the artistic process besides just performing.
Well, I just got the chills because I think my esteem for the singing artist is paramount.
Hmm.
I have the greatest respect and just I'm in awe of the singing artist, and and certainly all my colleagues, every the conductor, the music, the pianist, it's a true collaboration,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and we do work collaboratively. So I'm just thinking, for example, Dunya Peckstein brought the Diary of Anne Frank to us. Oh gosh, there have been so many recommendations
Hmm.
from singers over the years, and also, by the way, finding other singers. Some of the best recommendations come from other singers for
Hmm.
singers.
Hmm.
So I believe always that the performer is a highly trained and experienced artist, and they should be brought front and center into more planning and participation
Hmm.
in the life of the company.
So the Anne Frank was one example of where a singer suggested this
Yes,
opera.
yes,
Had it
yes.
been performed, or had this person performed in it, or
It was from this. In this case, it was a Russian composer named Gregory Fried, and a Jewish composer in Russia under. I don't know if everyone knows that in the Soviet Union there was a great deal of prejudice toward Jewish um, population, so he had to smuggle out this score to an American ambassador
wow.
in this country, and Dunya found out about it, and we did the American premiere, and then did a number of performances. Cleveland Opera booked us for 4 performances, and
Hmm.
we did many. Um, I mean, you could say we did the New York and the American premiere of this work.
Hmm.
It's
And
gone on now to other companies have done it.
but I listened to the excerpt that you sent me, and just for our listeners, I will be putting up the links to various performance excerpts from the company, and wonderfully sung, by the way. Because
Yeah.
I was looking at this actually this morning and saying, just the physicality of the singer of portraying this young girl, and the fear and the wonder was, quite impressive and moving. And you don't necessarily get that when you're on a huge stage. So that space in which you work, um, is, I think, very accommodating to the I wouldn't say they're chamber operas, but very accommodating to the size of the cast and the subject matter. The other one that I found fascinating, well, I found all of them actually, was the one about the astronaut's tale.
Oh, right, right.
And the set, you had this ladder, this a platform, a ladder on stage left, and then this mechanism where it lowered over the ladder with a big circle inside, and the lighting where you recreated like the constellations. And I was like, how did I miss this? It was beautiful and beautifully sung as well. So let's talk about your creative process. So you get a new opera. It's never been staged before. Let's talk about how you break this down, because this is Women in Music History Month. All right, so we want to know, we want some like little nuggets that some of us can carry away, that, well, maybe there's an aspiring stage director out there, who knows, they may call you one day, who knows. But so you get a score, and someone says, oh, Miss Rhodes, I have this opera, would you just look at it for me? Right, so then what
Hmm.
happens?
Well, two things for me. I do read the libretto because I really want to see how the story is put together, and the characters and the trajectory and the themes and what it's telling us. So that has to really resonate. Um, and then, of course, almost simultaneously is how the music um, reflects and enhances and expresses that story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so um, many times we help further develop a piece. So something is put together, but it needs fleshing out. It needs some editing.
You
Some
workshop it, in other words.
yes, yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. We take things through steps, and so one of the programs we've been part of for 17 years is called Page to Stage, comma New American Opera Previews, and
Uh-huh.
we've been doing that in conjunction with three companies: Manhattan School of Music, that provides the space and some of the singers, American Opera Projects, and Encompass. So we do 30 minutes of fully memorized and staged portions of a new opera that we're developing. And then afterwards, we have on stage discussion with the creative team and the singers, and we get feedback from the audience. And that has been a very important step before we launch into a fully produced world premiere.
Mm-hmm. And I think also it's helpful to a composer, especially one who may not have worked in the medium before. I think sometimes, and this is just my personal prejudice, I guess, sometimes composers, they think they think in terms of notes, but not in terms of voices, and what a voice, if I'm going to write a string of high C's, is it really necessary, or is it prudent? You know, and then some are not necessarily familiar with the stage. They have a great story, they write great music, but the dramatic part, what's the word? Dramaturge
Mm-hmm,
is.
mm-hmm,
So that's also where you would come
mm-hmm,
in
mm-hmm.
doing that. Hmm.
Well, I mean, for example, you're quite right. I mean, when we look at the music, we do look to see, is it well written for the voice? Are the words well set? Uh, and we learned all that from Virgil Thompson, who is a master of word setting.
Yes.
So we, and not just myself, but our music director, our pianist staff, we're all looking at these elements.
Hmm.
And sometimes you have to make adjustments with the composer, um, and hopefully they're open to that, because it's one thing to have something on the page, on the written page. It's another thing to put it onto people in time and space,
Yes,
and
yes.
there's where the dots have to connect.
I remember when I was at the Juilliard, I had David Diamond for a teacher.
Right.
And I had never thought about text setting, really deeply until I took his class. And so that's the first thing. If, I used to do a lot of contemporary music, and that would be one of the first things I would look at. And then if it wasn't working, for me, or I thought maybe a change might work, most of the time the composers were open to it. And I think that's the thing, that graciousness and that generosity comes on both sides. So the resulting work is the examples of what I saw on these clips and what I heard on some of the recordings. Just beautiful, beautiful. Can you talk about your collaboration with? Because I was talking about Langston Hughes this week. Ricky Ian Gordon,
Oh,
the piece that was done. It was
oh
sung so
yeah.
beautifully by Teresa Ham Smith. And just for everyone, I will be putting up the links so after this you can go listen. But we're just talking today, two girls talking.
Well, just Teresa Ham Smith, and she just called me the other day.
Okay,
She's in Georgia, and Sherry Boone and Michael Lofton. Um,
Michael.
Yeah. So they
Yeah.
were in the original production that we did back in 1995. So working with Ricky is a joy. You know, now this is going back a few years, but he would call me up and he'd say, Nancy, I just wrote this song. He said, you want to hear it? And I said, yes. And he would lay the phone down by the piano and then he would play and sing it. So this went on for, finally I said, Ricky, why don't I just come over and let's see what. So I went over to his apartment and he started singing and playing all these, and I would go from laughing and being joyous to weeping to feeling the anguish and the anger of what the African American journey was at that time period, especially and so I said, well, look, why don't we make a show? And Ricky said, well, okay. And so we said, well, let's come up with a title. And it took like about a minute. He said, well, I think it should be called Only Heaven, which is the title of one of the poems by
Yes.
Langston Hughes. And
Yes.
so we called it Only Heaven and put it together. And it was one of the most joyous productions I think that we've
Now,
done.
is the whole production available online so people can see it, or do you have to
No,
just mount it
no,
again?
the whole only excerpts are. But Teresa Ham Smith called me up the other day and she said, "Oh, I wanted the song My People," and I realized that it hadn't been excerpted because there's other parts of the piece that are online.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's on a VHS. Uh, so I have to get it transferred. But also, another company, a couple of years after we did it, made a recording. So there is also I think, a commercial recording,
Mm-hmm.
um, not with our cast, but a very good cast. And so,
Well, you were first, so that's important.
yes, well, Um, yes. Something just flew out of my head. I'll come back to it.
Sorry.
Uh,
Well, I have to say, I was at a meeting down at Opera America. Oh, this was a while back, way before the pandemic, and I was saying, wouldn't it be great if, because there were some composers in the room, including Anthony Davis, and I was
mm,
saying, wouldn't it be great if there could be an excerpt like this Sergius Kagan book that we've had for years and years and years, but of contemporary opera, because oftentimes, like I said, I don't know where I was when all of this stuff was going on, but I missed it, and I'm sorry I did. But some of it is so beautiful and interesting and intriguing, all three, and you want to be able to share it with someone, and maybe I have students now, maybe give some of my hey, go learn this piece, and it would be great if someone could sit down and do that. Just from the repertoire that you have produced over the years, it's like what, 50 operas?
68.
68. Okay. So the best of the best Encompass opera vocal anthology. It
Yeah.
would be amazing to get that out, because I think as we can get things heard, then they'll get produced even more, you know.
Well, that's right, and we've been talking about that, and that's
Ah,
on our list, and maybe you can help us with that.
well, I'll do, I don't know what I can do, but I'll do what I can. It's like I do what I can when I can. I do what I can when I can, and I'll be happy to help. Seriously,
Oh, that would be great.
because my mission is to get people's stories told and to promote the arts. You know, especially at this point in time. So let's talk about what the company is up to now. Well, wait a minute. You said you went to Europe for about 15 years, was it?
Mhm,
Now,
mhm.
what was the impetus to do that? Because Encompass was going strong, and then you just upped and left, or
Well, two things happened. We had a theater on 48th Street between 6th and 7th, up above a peep show, and underneath and underneath a karate studio. Uh,
I'm
and there
sorry.
we were. And there we were doing American opera. Aaron Copland came, a whole raft of people came and saw our work. Well, at one point, the landlord came in, and he
Oh
was like
dear.
one of those, yeah. And he said, "Well, for what your little opera company can pay, I can get 20 times that from the peep show downstairs." So simultaneously, we get a phone call from the Holland Festival in Amsterdam, almost
Ah.
like crossing the wave. And so they said, "We are doing a big program on American opera, and we would like your company to put the whole stage version together." And so we said, "Okay." And they paid for it, and we took 7 singers, and I came up with the title, Eccentrics, Outcasts, and Visionaries, comma, a century of American opera from 1850 to 1950.
So talk about the rep first. I want to hear what the pieces were.
Oh my gosh, I should have them in front of me. Um, we did The Witch of Salem, an excerpt. Yeah, this is from the 1850s. Oh my goodness. Uh, the glass blowers, just a raft of them. And then getting a little more contemporary, we did scenes from Treemonisha,
Uh-huh.
from Regina, from The Mother of Us All. Um, gosh, The Tender Land, Aaron Copland.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a whole program.
I think it's time to recreate that one here,
Well, you're
post
absolutely right.
pandemic, you
Oh,
know?
by the way, we did a scene from Emperor Jones, and the wonderful bass, who left us too soon, Arthur Woodley.
Oh,
Uh,
Arthur, yes.
yeah,
Rest in
so
peace.
Arthur was part of the company, of the Encompass company that performed at the Holland Festival,
Mm-hmm.
and he played. That was one of the. Everybody played several
So
roles.
after the festival, though, you stayed, right?
Uh, I went back and forth. Yes, essentially stayed and directed Death in Venice in Sweden, um, a number of American musicals, West Side Story in
Yeah.
Ankara for the State Theater of Turkey, Kiss Me Kate for the National Opera of Albania, um, and I did Carmen in Norway, and Happy End by Kurt Weill in Finland. And also, I was working with the International Theater
Mm-hmm.
Institute, um, and we would do programming on contemporary opera and new music theater in different countries.
Uh-huh.
And this was during the last 10 years of the Cold War. So we would go to Eastern Bloc countries, and those countries would present their artists, and then we would, as the board of that, we would, you know, have panel discussions and workshops, and so I was doing that also at the same time.
I think you need to write a book, Nancy.
I know. That's
Okay.
what even Virgil said that way back when.
Okay, so Virgil's speaking and I'm hearing it and I'm telling you,
Oh,
because what you have done is so extraordinary, I would say. You know,
mm,
from domestically producing and whatnot, and then Europe and the Eastern Bloc, and then post Eastern Bloc. I'm sure you have stories about that as well. I want to circle back
mm,
to your process.
mm.
So we talked about getting new operas, but say you get a score, it's all done, it's been workshopped or whatever already, and well, not even that. Let's back up. So you get the libretto. In terms of staging, how do you start to shape those things with a new work? Because there's no
Mm.
point of reference, right?
That's true. That is true. And I think people do forget that because, you know, if you are playing Carmen, you have a lot of versions to listen to and a lot of film footage to watch and so forth. But with a brand new work, you really don't have that.
And I'm reminded, I took a directing class for a hot minute, and and bless his heart, I can't remember his name right now, but he's passed now. But he said, you know, when you get a play, a published play, those directions are the original directions from the first production, oftentimes,
Right.
unless the writer has specifically written something in. So it's not necessarily put in granite, you know. But for
Mhm.
you, creating movement, I mean, you have to sit and think about it, right? Or do you wait till you get your actors and you see their physicality and what they can do? How does it work for you?
Well, first of all, just so you know, my training was in theater directing for the theater. So when you get that kind of background, you have to be really prepared
Mm-hmm.
to come in with ideas and. But I also work very hand in glove with what the performer brings in, because they have a whole energy and a way of interconnecting with each other. So it's a mixture, but as a director, and I have a lot of preparation because I'm working with the set designer, the
Mm-hmm.
costume designer, and the lighting designer before. So we have worked out a whole world, a physical world for the singer to work in for the piece. And that's done in advance. So we have what you call a ground plan. We know what's on the stage and how, where everything is sitting and how far apart the chairs are from one. So there has to be a map in a way of a world, and then it becomes having the singer interact with each other and
Yeah.
really bringing the life uh, to the to the
Well,
story.
I remember though, it's easier if there is stuff on the stage. Like with your with the comedy, the Awake or a Wedding, you had furniture, you had a mirror, there were different things to touch and feel and stuff. But for a play, a show like The Astronaut's Tale, there's nothing there, and except the lighting on the floor and that ladder. So how do you create interaction and drama within spaces like that? I guess that's my question, because I find that fascinating, you know.
Yeah, I it's then it's really becomes very important to know what the conflicts are and what the intentions are, what the needs are of the characters, what
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to get from each other, um, and what the dynamic is, so that you work much more in the way actors work. Um, and then of course props do help because even with the astronaut's tale there were certain props, like when his dog, the young astronaut, his dog was run over by a car, and
Mm-hmm.
then he went off stage and he carried the dog. Well, he was in a kind of a burlap sack, but he carried the dog in, and then he sang over his emotions. So he was kneeling over the body of his puppy dog, or a dog that was killed. So that adds an element of truth and authenticity, and it helps the singer, it helps the audience to
Hmm.
really. So even though the stage was bare, that prop was very helpful.
So, do you think this is one of the strengths of American singers? Is that they tend to really take that acting element seriously in their training?
Well, I can tell you that having worked in Europe and parts of Asia all those years, that all of the general directors and so forth said the American singers were the best in the world. And there's a reason for that. The training is our American singers can sing in three, four, five languages. Um, they learn quickly. I was told that in Germany, for example, a lot of the times the music is spoon fed,
Really?
whereas yeah, well, I don't
Oh,
know, but that's why this is what some people have said. But American singers come in with the music pretty much learned, if not completely. They're much more prepared. They can work faster and
even the
quicker.
contemporary pieces?
The contemporary pieces are another story.
Hmm.
We do a lot of coaching um, uh, before they can't come in with it all learned. It's just
Yeah.
not it's just impossible. Um, but they do, our singers that learn something new like that, we give them a lot of coaching, but they also work on their own.
So they're
And often,
musicians.
yes, they're musicians.
I remember
I
being
mean,
at
I told you
Tanglewood.
my hat is off to the singing artists. You guys are amazing.
I remember being at Tanglewood, and Gunther Schuller said, "Singers and musicians," and we all groaned when, because we're musicians too. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's very encouraging to hear because my next question and my next to last, I guess, penultimate question is, so what do you think about the future of American opera and how singers can prepare themselves for careers? So I guess the future of American opera first, and then how singers can prepare themselves to have careers post-pandemic, actually.
Um, well, I think the future of opera is is there are going to be more chamber operas. There are a lot of the big houses in the United States have second stages
Mm-hmm.
where they're programming more chamber opera. So there'll be more additional opportunities. And I think that um, I think it's not easy for singers. I taught for 12 years at Manhattan School of Music. So I know what it takes for the training that the singer, and then once they come out, where are they going to be working? Um, so that's a tricky question because even in New York City, a number of the companies have closed. We
And
know that.
it used to be, okay, we'll go to Europe and do a audition tour and maybe get a fest contract somewhere. But that seems, am I talking with people? Like I said, I've kind of been off the grid for a while. Am I talking with people that seems to be drying up a lot, if not
Hmm.
even it's happened already? So, what do you think singers should do specifically? So they go through that process of undergrad, graduate school, an apprenticeship, and then what happens after that? Should they promote themselves? Is entrepreneurship a way to do it, or what would you think?
Um, well, any working artist in this country, in some respects, has to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just I don't see any other way out of that. But I think that the singer should work with people and companies, even if it's small companies that that have their best interests at heart, who are working in a positive manner, who are taking the music seriously, providing a healthy environment in which to work, and stretching their wings with smaller companies and making sure that their agents and whoever come to see their work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's also young artist programs in the regional opera companies that they can participate in. Um, if they're one of these people that just have this huge, incredible vocal mechanism, and it's so clear that they're going to be doing, grand opera
Mm-hmm.
of the world repertoire, then they may find themselves getting jobs in Europe and other roles, maybe cover roles at first, and then they step into or double casting some of the major roles. Some singers do crossover. They could do more legitimate musical theater. Richard Rodgers, um, Carousel, for example,
Mm-hmm.
Audra
Mm-hmm.
McDonald got her start, or I think early on, starring in Carousel. And then, so she, as a singing artist, does opera and legitimate Broadway musicals. So
And I
you
think
have done that.
that's true.
You have done that. You
But
were, yes, you have, you're a perfect example.
but I think American opera demands that you're able to have this flexibility. That's what I call it, and adaptability. And if there's anything that we're learning as Americans is that's part of our strength, as you were
Mhm,
saying.
mhm.
Um, the other question I had was, where do you see the future of opera? You're talking about chamber operas, but in terms of the pieces that are and the stories that are getting told, what do you think is coming to the forefront now? There's a lot of political and social commentary opera right now. Um, it to my mind, it may become dated in a way because it's set in a particular time. Um, or is there a universality to it? You know?
Well, I think the great thing about opera is it can um, encompass very deep and important social, political themes. Opera is the perfect place to examine these stories. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it depends on how it's expressed. A great story of somebody's struggle, socially, politically, is timeless. So many operas, even though it might be a story from the past, but it can be a timeless expression.
Well, I'm thinking right now of this opera about the Amazon.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that for a moment? Because it was, knowing some of those stories, having lived during, it was Nicaragua, Honduras, and knowing some of the things that happened with people in that area, which we're right today dealing with some of the consequences of those social political actions with people who are refugees and moving north because of violence and whatnot. Can you talk about that opera briefly?
Yes, well, Angel of the Amazon is based on a true story.
Hmm.
It's composed, and the libretto is by young composer named Evan Mack. Um, and he heard about Sister Dorothy was a nun from Ohio, and her heart told her to go to South America, and her work was helping indigenous families gain land rights. Because they were indentured servants under these colonial landowners. And
Hmm.
she helped an extraordinary to educate, get them out from under that, creative villages and fruit and vegetable farms. And then the loggers came in and burned their village to the ground. And destroyed all of that work, and then started slashing and burning the rainforest, for jobs. But Sister Dorothy took a stand, and she went to the Congress, and spoke out and actually named names. And then when she came back, she was 73 years old, she always carried a Bible with her, and she was beloved. They called her Dot. She became an activist. She wore a t-shirt and Birkenstocks. I mean, she really rolled her sleeves up. And she was walking through the forest, and two gunmen came upon her, and she read the Beatitudes. There was an eyewitness behind a tree who then reported on this, and they shot her. And but her legacy lives on, and especially now, because right now, as we're talking, the rainforest is being destroyed, and the indigenous tribes and villages and cultures are the ones on the front lines who are standing up in support for the preservation of
Mm-hmm.
our the rainforest and our planet around the world. So that another program I started 7 years ago called Paradigm Shifts Music and Film Festival
Uh-huh.
is for the purpose of bringing together, bridging indigenous cultures and knowledge, women's wisdom, and social justice, environmental issues through the lens of independent film and music. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a program I'm very and I'm very happy that we are able as artists to present this kind of a program, where everything in life intersects. Um,
And I think it does because oftentimes people think, oh well, you're just an artist, you're a singer, sit down, be quiet. Or
no,
even with the sports people, sit down, be quiet. But we have just as much right, and even more so. Artists are on the forefront of protest and bringing up stories and images that may be uncomfortable. I know I spoke earlier about wanting to laugh. I want to do that as well. But a story like The Angel of the Amazon is something that needs to be heard. A story like Central Park 5 needs to be heard as well. Um, and as artists, as producers, people who are involved in the creative arts, we have to keep telling our stories. Now, we've come to almost to the end of our hour, and I want to ask you, is there anything that you would like to say to the artists out there, the people who support and love the arts?
well, I do want to circle back to Only Heaven, the Ricky Ian Gordon Langston Hughes piece,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes the mind goes. But the person who originally commissioned some of those songs from Ricky was Carolyn Blackwell.
Oh, yes.
And she has a recording of many of those songs, and it's just delicious and beautiful. So Carolyn gets a great big hats off for coming up with that initial opportunity, and then we expanded on it. I my thing is we have to do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
We're artists, and nobody can take that away. And I've often said, um, I would do I would do the work anywhere, with one other person in a park, in a church basement. It doesn't matter, as long as we put forward our sincere thoughts and joy and expression and community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Artists have always worked together happily. From other cultures and countries, we thrive on differences. That's what is the joy and the excitement of being alive, is learning about other people's languages and music and food and the way they think. That's what we do as artists. So I say, send us into the world. We'll get things straightened out. And
Hopefully, God willing, yes.
so to never give up. That would
Never give
be
up. Yeah.
never give up. And I can tell you there have been many artists and singers that were at turning points when they passed through our doors, and we, as a community, helped bridge that gap. And
Encompass New Opera Theater has a special place in the American fabric, the American cultural fabric. And so I hope that you will have many, many more years of success and excellence in producing. And now that I'm here, I'm gonna be you're gonna look up and I'll be sitting in the audience. Okay.
Well,
Um,
I hope you're going to do more than that. Now, listen, we didn't say that you were in our original production of Transatlantic by George Antile. This is when you
yeah.
were just a baby, of course, but
Well,
you worked with us, and we
yes.
were honored and thrilled, Carolyn. So coming back now is such a joy to see you and be with you soon in person.
Well, I'm very happy to reconnect, and we all look forward to when the pandemic is over. So, Nancy, thank you so much for spending this short time with us. I'm sure there's much more, and maybe I can have you back, later in the year when before the pandemic is done, because I know as soon as they give us the all clear, everybody's going to just burst forth, in creativity and activity. So thank you so much, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with Barbara DeMaio, who
Oh,
is the head of Painted Sky Opera in Oklahoma.
oh,
So
wow.
take care, everyone.
Thank you.